His foot slammed into her books, scattering them across the pristine academy hallway like casualties of war. Isabella Ezzy didn't flinch anymore. 3 years of Kang Minho's cruelty had carved survival instincts into her bones. But when their eyes met this time, something shifted in the air between them, dangerous and electric. His breath caught, his pulse spiked, and for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Minho felt fear. Not of her, but of the impossible thing awakening inside his chest every time she looked at him with those defiant brown eyes. Welcome to K-fairytales stories, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Isabella gathered her scattered textbooks in silence, her curly hair falling forward to hide her face. She'd learned not to react, not to cry, not to give Kang Minho the satisfaction of seeing her break. Seoul International Academy was supposed to be her fresh start, a prestigious school where her grandmother's sacrifice could finally mean something. Instead, it had become a battlefield where the most popular boy in school had made her his personal target. Minho stood above her, his designer shoes inches from her fingers. His friends laughed behind him, their voices echoing off marble walls, but he wasn't laughing. His jaw was tight, his dark eyes fixed on the curve of her neck as she bent to retrieve her things. Something twisted in his stomach, not the satisfaction he usually felt, but something else. Something that made him want to reach down and help her. The thought terrified him. Pathetic, he said instead, his voice cold. You should transfer back to whatever village you crawled out of. Isabella's hand stilled on her chemistry textbook. Slowly, she looked up at him. Her eyes were dry. That was new. Usually by now, there would be tears threatening to spill. But today, she just stared at him with something that looked almost like pity. Are you done? She asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. His friends went silent, sensing the shift. Minho felt heat crawl up his neck. Anger, embarrassment, something else he couldn't name. He wanted to say something cutting, something that would put her back in her place. Instead, he found himself unable to look away from her mouth. I'm done when I say I'm done, he managed, but his voice lacked its usual bite. Isabella stood, clutching her books to her chest. She was shorter than him by several inches, curvier than the skeletal girls who usually surrounded him, her dark skin luminous even in the harsh fluorescent lighting. She shouldn't be beautiful. He'd spent 3 years trying to convince himself she wasn't. But standing this close, breathing the same air, Minho felt something crack inside the armor he'd spent his whole life building. Then say it, she challenged softly. Say you're done, walk away, find someone else to torture. The hallway had emptied. His friends had wandered off, bored now that the show was over. It was just the two of them in this moment, and Minho realized with horrifying clarity that this was what he'd wanted all along. Her attention, her eyes on him, her presence in his space. He took a step closer. She didn't retreat. Why don't you fight back? He asked. And the question surprised him as much as it surprised her. Isabella's laugh was bitter. Would it change anything? Would you stop? I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty tasted strange on his tongue. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, maybe hope. It made him want to destroy her and protect her in equal measure. The contradiction was maddening. He'd been raised to be perfect, controlled, untouchable. The Kang family didn't do messy emotions. They certainly didn't develop inexplicable obsessions with scholarship students who didn't fit into their world. You should stay away from me, Minho said, but he didn't move. I'm not good for you. I know, Isabella whispered. You've made that abundantly clear for 3 years. The next day brought rain that drummed against classroom windows like accusations. Isabella sat in the back of advanced literature, trying to focus on Shakespearean sonnets while feeling Minho's gaze burning into the back of her neck. He sat 3 rows ahead with his usual crowd, the sons and daughters of Seoul's elite, all designer clothes and casual cruelty. But he kept turning around, his eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. After class, she tried to slip out quickly. His hand caught her wrist in the hallway. Wait, Minho said. Isabella froze. His touch was careful, almost gentle. Nothing like the deliberate violence of his usual torments. She looked down at his fingers wrapped around her wrist, then up at his face. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something desperate. What do you want? She asked tiredly. He opened his mouth, closed it. His friends were watching from down the hall, their faces curious. Minho's jaw tightened, and Isabella watched him make a choice. He released her wrist like it burned him. "Nothing," he said coldly. "Just making sure you know where you belong." But his eyes said something different. His eyes said, "Please don't walk away yet." His eyes said, "I don't know what's happening to me." His eyes said, "I'm drowning, and you're the only thing that feels real." Isabella pulled away from him and walked toward her next class, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard one of his friends laugh and say something crude about slumming it. She heard Minho's sharp response, the threat in his voice. She didn't look back, but something warm bloomed in her chest despite her better judgment. Later that night, she worked her shift at the cafe near campus, serving overpriced lattes to students who barely saw her. The rain had turned Seoul's streets into rivers of neon reflections. She was wiping down tables when the door chimed, and Kang Min-ho walked in, soaked to the bone, his perfectly styled hair plastered to his forehead. Their eyes met across the cafe. He looked lost, vulnerable. Nothing like the monster who'd made her life hell for 3 years. Isabella's co-worker, Ji-eun, whispered excitedly about serving the Kang air, but Isabella just picked up a towel and walked to where he stood dripping on the clean floor. "You'll catch cold," she said, offering the towel. Minho stared at it like he'd never seen fabric before. Then slowly his hand reached out and took it. His fingers brushed hers, and electricity shot up her arm. His breath caught. She saw his pupils dilate, saw the way his body went rigid with awareness. "Why are you being nice to me?" he asked hoarsely. "I don't know," Isabella admitted. "Maybe I'm stupid." "You're not stupid." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "Don't ever say that about yourself." Something in her chest cracked open. This wasn't the Minho who shoved her in hallways. This was someone else, someone raw and uncertain and achingly young. Before she could stop herself, Isabella reached up and pushed his wet hair back from his forehead. The gesture was automatic, maternal almost, but the way he leaned into her touch was anything but innocent. "Isabella," he breathed her name like a prayer or a curse. "You should go home," she whispered. "Get warm, sleep." But Minho didn't move. He just stood there with her hand in his hair and rain dripping onto the cafe floor, looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to water. When she finally lowered her hand, his eyes followed the movement with something that looked like grief. The following morning, Isabella found her locker filled with expensive pastries from the French bakery downtown. No note, no explanation. But she knew. She knew from the way Minho watched her during assembly, from the intensity in his gaze when she bit into a croissant at lunch, from the satisfied curl of his mouth when he saw that she hadn't thrown his gifts away. His friends noticed the shift. Park Jae-sung cornered her after calculus, his handsome face twisted with something ugly. "What game are you playing?" he demanded. "I don't know what you mean," Isabella said, trying to move past him. Jae-sung blocked her path. "Minho hasn't been himself since you showed up. First, he was obsessed with making your life miserable. Now he's what, buying you breakfast? Staring at you like you're some kind of goddess?" "That's not my fault," Isabella shot back. "Isn't it?" Jae-sung leaned closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Girls like you. You think you can climb the ladder by seducing guys like us. But Minho belongs with someone from his world, someone who understands the rules." "I don't want him," Isabella lied. But Jae-sung saw through it. He saw the way her hands trembled, the way her breath had quickened. He saw what she was trying desperately to hide, that Kang Min-ho had somehow gotten under her skin, that despite 3 years of torment, something inside her responded to his attention like a flower turning toward poisonous sunlight. "Stay away from him," Jae-sung warned, "or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of girl you really are." He walked away before Isabella could respond. She stood in the empty hallway, her chest tight with anger and fear, and something that felt dangerously close to longing. When she looked up, Minho was standing at the end of the corridor. He'd heard everything. His expression was thunderous. That evening, Jae-sung's car was found with its tires slashed and windows shattered. No one knew who did it. But when Isabella walked into class the next day, Minho was sitting in his usual seat with scraped knuckles and a smile that looked like vengeance. A few days later, Seoul International Academy held its annual winter gala, a charity event where students dressed like adults and pretended their money made them sophisticated. Isabella hadn't planned to attend. She had nothing to wear, no one to go with, no desire to watch Minho dance with girls who belonged in his world while she served canapes in a borrowed uniform. But her grandmother insisted. She'd saved money for months to buy Isabella a dress. Not designer, but beautiful nonetheless. Deep purple silk that hugged her curves and made her skin glow. When Isabella looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the girl staring back. For once, she looked like she belonged. The gala was held at a luxury hotel downtown, all crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. Isabella arrived alone, her heart hammering as she walked through doors held open by white-gloved attendants. The ballroom was magnificent, exactly the kind of opulent display the elite used to remind everyone else of their place in the hierarchy. She made it exactly 3 steps inside before Minho saw her. He was standing with a group of his friends, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look older, dangerous, untouchable. A girl with legs like a model and family connections like armor was laughing at something he'd said, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. But Minho wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Isabella like she'd shot him through the chest. Their eyes locked across the crowded ballroom. Everything else fell away. The music, the people, the careful social choreography. There was only the space between them, charged with 3 years of violence and something new. Something neither of them knew how to name. Minho started moving toward her. The girl on his arm called after him, confused. His friends exchanged glances. But he didn't stop, didn't look back, just cut through the crowd with singular focus until he was standing in front of Isabella, breathing hard like he'd run a marathon. "You came," he said. "I didn't think you'd notice." His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I notice everything about you. I always have, that's the problem." Isabella's pulse thundered in her throat. "Minho." "Dance with me," he interrupted. "It wasn't a request." "You're supposed to be with—" "I don't care." His voice was rough with something that sounded like desperation. "Dance with me, please." The please broke her. Isabella let him take her hand and lead her onto the dance floor. His arm came around her waist, pulling her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. They moved together like they'd been doing this for years, like their bodies knew something their minds hadn't caught up to yet. "Why do you hate me?" Isabella whispered against his shoulder. Minho's hand tightened on her waist. "I don't hate you, I've never hated you." "Then why?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The confession came out broken, desperate. "Because every time I see you, I want things I'm not supposed to want. Because you make me feel human and I was raised to be anything but." Isabella pulled back just enough to look at his face. His eyes were dark with want and fear in equal measure. Before she could respond, before she could process what he'd admitted, someone tapped Minho's shoulder. Lee Hee-jin stood there in a dress that cost more than Isabella's grandmother made in 3 months, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Can I cut in? We need to talk about the foundation fundraiser next month." Minho's jaw tightened. "Not now." "It's important, Minho Oppa." Hee-jin's eyes flicked to Isabella with barely concealed disdain. "Unless you're too busy slumming to care about your family's reputation." The insult was deliberate, public, designed to remind everyone watching exactly where Isabella stood in Seoul's social hierarchy. Minho's entire body went rigid with rage. His hand flexed on Isabella's waist like he was fighting the urge to do something violent. "Get out of my sight," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Before I forget, my mother taught me not to embarrass people in public." Hee-jin's perfect smile faltered. Around them, conversations had stopped. Everyone was watching the Kang heir choose a scholarship student over one of their own. The social implications would echo for weeks. "You'll regret this," Hee-jin hissed before walking away, her heels clicking sharply against marble floors. Isabella tried to pull away. "Minho, you shouldn't have—" "Don't." His grip tightened, keeping her close. "Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. Not about this, not about you." They finished the dance in charged silence, his hand burning through the silk of her dress, her heart hammering against her ribs. When the song ended, Minho didn't release her. Instead, he leaned down, his mouth close to her ear. "Meet me on the terrace in 10 minutes, he whispered. "Please, I need to talk to you, alone." Then he let her go and walked away, leaving Isabella standing in the middle of the dance floor with her entire body trembling and every eye in the room dissecting what they'd just witnessed. The terrace overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. The city spread out below like a promise or a threat. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself against the December cold, wondering if coming out here was the stupidest or bravest thing she'd ever done. Behind her, the glass doors slid open. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. "You're shivering," Minho said. Before she could respond, his jacket settled warm and heavy around her shoulders, carrying his scent, expensive cologne and something darker, uniquely him. Isabella pulled the jacket tighter, feeling surrounded by him even though he hadn't touched her yet. "Why did you bring me out here?" She asked the skyline. "Because I'm tired of lying." Minho moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his body heat. "I'm tired of pretending I don't want you. That I haven't wanted you since the first day you walked into Seoul International with your head high, and your eyes defiant, refusing to be small just because they wanted you to be." Isabella's breath caught. "You bullied me. For 3 years you made my life hell." "I know," his voice cracked with self-loathing. "Because I was terrified of what you made me feel. Because wanting you meant weakness, and I was raised to be strong. Because loving you meant choosing you over everything I was supposed to be." "Loving me?" Isabella turned to face him, her heart in her throat. Minho looked at her with eyes full of anguish and want. "From that very first day, I just didn't have the courage to admit it. So I hurt you instead. I pushed you away. I tried to make you hate me because hating me was safer than loving me back." Tears burned Isabella's eyes. "You succeeded. I do hate you." "I know." He stepped closer, and she could see his hands shaking. "But I'm hoping maybe you could learn not to. I'm hoping maybe I could spend the rest of my life earning your forgiveness. Your trust, your—" "Don't," Isabella cut him off. "Don't say it. Not when tomorrow you'll go back to your world and I'll go back to mine. Not when your friends will mock you for dancing with me. Not when everything about this is impossible." "Then let's be impossible together," Minho said fiercely. He caught her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Let me prove to you that I'm not the monster I pretended to be. Let me show you how I really feel." "And how is that?" Isabella whispered, trapped in his gaze. His answer was to kiss her. The world tilted sideways. Isabella's hands came up to push him away but ended up fisting in his shirt instead, pulling him closer. Minho kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air, like 3 years of wanting had finally found its release. His hands were in her hair, on her waist, trembling with restraint as he tried not to overwhelm her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minho rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you for 3 years, and I'll spend the next 3 years, the next 30 years, proving it to you if you'll let me." Isabella's hands were still fisted in his shirt. Her lipstick was smeared across his mouth. Everything about this was reckless and dangerous and completely insane. But when she looked into his eyes and saw nothing but raw, desperate honesty, she made a choice that would change everything. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" Hope lit his face like sunrise. "Okay," she repeated. "But if you ever hurt me again—" "I won't. I swear on everything I am, I won't." He kissed her again, softer this time, like she was something precious, like she was something worth protecting. And for the first time in 3 years, Isabella let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Kang Min-ho could be more than the boy who'd made her cry. Maybe he could be the man who'd make her whole. The next morning brought consequences neither of them had anticipated. Isabella's phone exploded with texts from numbers she didn't recognize, some curious, some cruel, all demanding to know if the rumors were true. Someone had photographed them on the terrace, their kiss captured in grainy but unmistakable detail. By Monday morning, the picture had spread through Seoul International Academy like wildfire. Isabella walked through the front gates with her head high, but her hands shook inside the pockets of Minho's jacket, the one he'd insisted she keep. Whispers followed her down hallways. Girls who'd never spoken to her before suddenly had opinions about her character, her motives, her body. Boys who'd barely noticed her existence now looked at her with speculation that made her skin crawl. She found her locker covered in crude messages written in permanent marker. Slurs in Korean and English, threats. Someone had taped condoms to the door with a note. "You'll need these for your sugar daddy." Isabella's vision blurred with humiliation and rage, but she refused to cry. Not here, not where they could see. Take it down, a cold voice commanded behind her. Isabella turned to find Minho standing there with his closest friends, Park Jae-sung, Kim Tae-ho, and Lee Dong-hyun. But Minho wasn't looking at his friends. He was staring at Isabella's defaced locker with an expression that promised murder. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands were fists at his sides. "Who did this?" he asked quietly, his voice deadly calm. "Minho, it doesn't matter," Isabella started. "It matters to me who did this." A crowd had gathered, drawn by the tension crackling in the air. Isabella recognized some of the faces. Girls who'd been competing for Minho's attention since middle school. Boys who'd laughed when he made her life miserable. Now they all watched with hungry eyes, waiting to see what would happen. Lee Hee-jin pushed through the crowd, her expression carefully innocent. "Is something wrong?" Minho's eyes snapped to her face. Whatever he saw there made his expression turn arctic. "You did this. I don't know what you're talking about." But Hye-jin's smile was sharp with satisfaction. "You're jealous," Minho said flatly. "You've been pursuing me for years, and I've never given you what you wanted. So now you're taking it out on Isabella because she has something you'll never have. My attention, my affection, my loyalty." Hee-jin's perfect mask cracked. "Her? You're choosing her over all of us?" "She's nothing, Minho. She's a charity case who got lucky with a scholarship. She doesn't belong in our world." "No," Minho agreed. "She doesn't. She's better than it. Better than you, better than me." He turned to his friends. "Clean this now, every word, and find out who else was involved. I want names." "Minho, are you serious?" Jae-sung asked. "You're going to war with our entire social circle over some—" "Finish that sentence and we're done." Minho's voice could have cut glass. "Isabella isn't some anything, she's mine. And anyone who touches what's mine answers to me." The possessiveness in his declaration should have made Isabella angry. Instead, it sent heat racing through her veins. She watched him face down his friends, his world, his entire carefully constructed social position. All for her. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Jae-sung held Minho's gaze for a long moment, then looked away first. "You're making a mistake." "Then it's my mistake to make." Later that night, Isabella's grandmother answered a knock at their small apartment door to find a delivery man with so many flowers he could barely see around them. Roses, orchids, lilies, a florist's shop worth of blooms that filled their 3 rooms with fragrance. The card read simply, "I'm sorry for everything. M.H." Isabella's grandmother watched her granddaughter cry over expensive flowers in their kitchen that smelled like poverty and kimchi, and she knew the Kim boy had finally broken through her girl's armor. The thought terrified her more than she wanted to admit. "Are you sure about him?" her grandmother asked in their native language. "No," Isabella admitted, "but I can't seem to stop wanting to be." The following weeks were a study in contradiction. At school, Minho kept his distance during classes, maintaining enough separation to protect Isabella from accusations that she was using him for grades or favors. But after the final bell, he was there, waiting by her locker, walking her to the bus stop, buying her dinner at restaurants she couldn't afford, then pretending not to notice when she only ordered the cheapest items on the menu. "I can pay for my own food," she protested one evening. "I know you can," Minho said. "But let me do this. Let me take care of you. I don't need taking care of." His hand found hers across the table. "Maybe I need to be the one who gets to do it. Did you think of that? Maybe taking care of you makes me feel like I'm not completely worthless." Isabella's resistance crumbled. She was learning that beneath Minho's perfect exterior lived a boy who'd never been allowed to be soft, who'd spent his whole life performing strength, who saw her as the only safe place to finally be vulnerable. It made her want to protect him as fiercely as he wanted to protect her. One evening in late January, Minho took her to his family's estate, a compound on the outskirts of Seoul that looked like something from a period drama. Isabella's breath caught as they drove through gates that opened with recognition of his car, past gardens perfectly maintained even in winter's grip, up to a house that wasn't a house but a mansion, sprawling and intimidating. "Your mother doesn't know I'm coming, does she?" Isabella asked nervously. Minho's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, but she needs to meet you. Needs to understand that you're not going anywhere." They found Mrs. Kang in her private sitting room, elegant in silk and pearls, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of someone who ran an empire from behind the scenes. When she looked up and saw Minho with Isabella, Her expression turned to ice. "What is the meaning of this?" Mrs. Kang asked in Korean, her tone making clear she didn't expect an answer. She expected obedience. "Mother, this is Isabella Ease, my girlfriend." Minho's hand found Isabella's, squeezing gently. "I wanted you to meet her properly instead of hearing rumors." Mrs. Kang stood slowly, her eyes cataloging everything about Isabella. Her second-hand coat, her careful makeup, her nervous posture. "The scholarship student. The one causing all the gossip." "The one I love," Minho corrected firmly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mrs. Kang moved around her desk with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. She stopped in front of Isabella, looking her up and down with an expression that made Isabella feel stripped to her bones. "Do you know what you're asking of him? By being with you, he's choosing to complicate every aspect of his future. Business relationships, family alliances, political connections. All of it becomes difficult when the Kang heir is involved with someone outside our social circle." "I know," Isabella said quietly. "I've tried to walk away. He won't let me. Because he's young and stupid and thinks love conquers all." Mrs. Kang's smile was sharp. "But love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't secure business deals. Love doesn't maintain the kind of power my family has built over 3 generations." "Mother," Minho started, his voice warning. "Quiet." Mrs. Kang didn't even look at her son. Her focus remained fixed on Isabella. "What are your intentions? Are you after his money? His status? The comfortable life he can provide?" The accusations should have made Isabella angry. Instead, they made her sad. Sad that Mrs. Kang lived in a world where love had to have ulterior motives, where choosing someone from outside the approved circle was seen as weakness instead of strength. "I don't want his money," Isabella said clearly. "I want him to be happy. And if that means walking away so he can have the life you've planned for him, then I will. But not because you commanded it, because I love him enough to let him choose." Something shifted in Mrs. Kang's expression, respect, maybe, or surprise. She studied Isabella for a long moment, then turned to her son. "You're certain about this?" "Completely," Minho said without hesitation. Mrs. Kang sighed, and suddenly she looked older, more human. "Your father will be furious. Your grandfather will probably threaten to write you out of the will. Our social circle will gossip for months." "I know. And you think she's worth all that?" Minho pulled Isabella against his side, his arm around her waist like armor. "She's worth everything." Mrs. Kang was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled, small but genuine. "Then I suppose I should get to know my future daughter-in-law. Sit both of you. We have much to discuss." The conversation that followed was awkward but not hostile. Mrs. Kang asked about Isabella's family, her studies, her plans for the future. She was sizing Isabella up, certainly, looking for weaknesses or ulterior motives. But she was also, Isabella realized, trying to understand what her son saw in this girl from another world. When they finally left hours later, Isabella's head was spinning. In the car, Minho reached over and took her hand. "That wasn't as bad as I thought it would be," he admitted. "She hates me." "No, she respects you. For my mother, that's much more important than liking someone." Isabella laughed despite herself. "Your world is so strange." "Our world," Minho corrected. "If you'll have me. If you'll have all of this. The complications, the judgment, the constant scrutiny." Isabella looked at his profile in the darkness, at the boy who'd tormented her and the man who'd chosen her, and she knew her answer before the question was fully formed. "Yes, I'll have it. I'll have you." Minho pulled the car over on a quiet street, killed the engine, and kissed her like his life depended on it. His hands were in her hair, on her face, trembling with restraint as he tried not to push too hard, too fast. But Isabella was done with restraint. 3 years of violence and 3 months of gentleness had built something inside her that demanded release. She climbed over the center console into his lap, straddling him in the driver's seat. Minho made a sound low in his throat, surprise and desire and maybe prayer. His hands found her waist, her hips, holding her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "Isabella," he breathed against her mouth, "we should stop." "I don't want to rush you. You've made me wait 3 years. I think that's long enough." They made it to Minho's private apartment, a penthouse his parents had bought him for his 18th birthday. The space was masculine and minimal, all clean lines and expensive furniture that looked barely used. Minho clearly spent most of his time elsewhere. But tonight it became sacred ground. He carried her to the bedroom, laying her down on sheets that smelled like him. The intensity in his eyes should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel powerful. She watched him shed his jacket, his shirt, revealing a body sculpted by years of training in martial arts and swimming. He was beautiful in the way sculptures are beautiful, perfect and cold until you touched them and found warmth underneath. When he covered her body with his own, when his hands began their careful exploration, Isabella felt something unlock inside her chest. This was trust. This was vulnerability. This was choosing to give yourself to someone who could destroy you and believing they'd be gentle instead. Minho kissed every inch of skin he uncovered, whispering apologies against her collarbone, her ribs, her stomach. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I was cruel. I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave enough to love you properly. Stop apologizing and just love me, Isabella whispered back. So he did. With hands that shook and breath that caught and a tenderness that made her cry, they discovered each other slowly, carefully, building toward something that felt like redemption. When Isabella finally gasped his name into the darkness, when Minho buried his face in her neck and breathed her in like she was oxygen itself, they both understood that they'd crossed a line. There was no going back now. They belonged to each other completely. Afterward, Isabella lay in his arms watching Seoul's lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. Minho's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder, his breath soft against her hair. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Dread pooled in Isabella's stomach. What? My father wants me to take a position in the family company after graduation. It means long hours, constant travel, representing the Kang name at every function and negotiation. He paused. It means my life will never really be my own. You don't want to do it. It doesn't matter what I want. It's expected. And if I refuse, if I choose a different path, I lose everything. My inheritance, my family's support. Probably my relationship with my parents. Isabella's throat tightened. And me? Where do I fit in this predetermined life? Minho shifted to look at her, his expression fierce. Everywhere. You fit everywhere. I don't care what my father wants or what society expects. I'm not giving you up. Not for money, not for family, not for anything. But what about what you want? Isabella asked. What do you want, Minho? If you could choose anything, what would your life look like? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I want to study art history. I want to travel and see the museums I've only read about. I want to take photographs and maybe teach someday. His voice cracked. I want to be someone you can be proud of instead of someone wearing my father's face. Isabella's heart broke for him. She cupped his face in her hands. I'm already proud of you. The fact that you know what you want, that you can even imagine a different life, that takes courage. But I don't have the strength to choose it. I'm not brave like you. Then let me be brave for both of us. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Isabella woke in the early hours of the morning, she slipped out of bed without waking him. She stood at the window watching the sun paint Seoul's skyline in shades of gold and pink, and she made a decision. If Minho couldn't choose himself, she would have to be the one to make the impossible choice. She was dressed and halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. Where are you going? Isabella turned to find him sitting up, his hair mussed from sleep, his expression vulnerable in the early light. Home, I need to think. About what? Fear crept into his voice. About us? About what happens next? About whether loving you means helping you build the life you actually want instead of the one you're expected to want. Minho threw off the sheets and crossed to her in 3 strides. His hands found her arms, his touch gentle but desperate. Don't leave like this. Don't walk away when things get complicated. I'm not walking away. I'm thinking about how to make this work. Really work. Not just for tonight, but for every night after. Isabella reached up to touch his face. I love you, that's not going to change. But love isn't enough if you wake up in 10 years hating yourself for all the choices you didn't make. I'll hate myself more if I lose you. You won't lose me, I promise. But Minho, you have to figure out who you are when you're not performing for your parents or your friends or me. You have to know yourself well enough to choose yourself. She kissed him softly. I'll be here when you do. Then she left, and Minho stood in his empty apartment feeling like he'd just watched the sun set permanently. But Isabella was right, and he knew it. He'd spent his whole life being who everyone else needed him to be. Maybe it was time to discover who he actually was. The next weeks were difficult. Minho threw himself into school, into family obligations, into the careful performance of being the perfect heir. But late at night, he pulled out his old camera, a gift from his grandmother who'd been the only person in his family to see his artistic inclinations as anything other than weakness. He began photographing Seoul at odd hours, capturing the city in ways that revealed its hidden beauty. Isabella watched from a careful distance, giving him space to find himself. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, but she'd meant what she said. If loving him meant letting him go, she would find the strength to do it. Then, 6 weeks after that morning in his apartment, Minho showed up at her school with his entire family in tow. Isabella saw them from across the courtyard. Mr. and Mrs. Kang in formal dress, Minho's younger sister looking confused, and Minho himself, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, carrying a portfolio under one arm. The entire school stopped to watch as the Kang family approached Isabella. Mrs. Kang spoke first. "Miss Easy, my son has something to say to you, and to everyone here." Minho stepped forward, his eyes finding hers across the distance. Then he turned to face the crowd that had gathered, his voice carrying in the winter air. "I've spent my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not. Someone strong, someone perfect, someone who always knew exactly what he wanted." He paused. "But the truth is, I didn't know what I wanted until Isabella Ease walked into my life and showed me what it meant to be brave. To choose yourself even when it's terrifying. To stand up for what matters, even when the whole world is against you." He opened the portfolio, pulling out photograph after photograph. Images of Seoul that were beautiful and raw and completely honest. Nothing like the careful compositions expected of someone from his background. "This is who I am. Not a future CEO or the Kang heir. Just someone who wants to see the world through a lens and maybe help others see it too." Mr. Kang stepped forward, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other while the whole school held its breath. Then Mr. Kang did something no one expected. He laughed, not cruelly but with genuine surprise. "You think I don't know who you are?" Mr. Kang asked. "I've watched you sneak out to take pictures since you were 12. I've seen the photography books you hide in your room. Did you really think I was blind to my own son's passion?" Minho's eyes widened. "But you never said anything. You kept pushing me toward business, because I wanted you to choose it yourself. To come to it on your own terms." Mr. Kang's expression softened. "But I see now that was wrong. You need to follow your own path, even if it's different from the one I imagined." Mrs. Kang moved to her husband's side, taking his hand. "We've already contacted several art schools in Seoul and abroad. If this is what you want, we'll support you, as long as you don't let fear make your choices for you." Minho turned back to Isabella, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I choose myself, and I choose you. Not because you're safe or convenient or approved by my social circle, but because loving you makes me want to be the person I was always meant to be." He crossed to her in 3 strides and dropped to one knee right there in front of the entire school. From his pocket, he pulled a ring. Not expensive or ostentatious, but beautiful in its simplicity. "Marry me. Not now, not until we're both ready. But someday, promise me someday." Isabella's vision blurred with tears. Every camera phone in the courtyard was recording this moment, capturing her choice for posterity. She could walk away. Could protect herself from the scrutiny, the judgment, the constant pressure of being with someone from Minho's world. Or she could choose love, choose courage, choose the impossible thing that had grown between them from hatred to something infinitely more precious. "Yes," she whispered, "someday. I promise." Minho stood and kissed her in front of everyone, and the courtyard erupted in chaos. Some cheering, some protesting. All of them bearing witness to the moment the Kang heir chose his own happiness over everyone else's expectations. 2 years later, after Isabella graduated top of her class, and Minho had been accepted into one of Europe's most prestigious photography programs, they stood in a small church in Seoul. Isabella wore a dress that blended Korean and Nigerian traditions. Minho wore a smile that had finally learned how to be genuine. Their families sat together, Mrs. Kang talking animatedly with Isabella's grandmother, Mr. Kang showing Isabella's aunt photos of the grandchildren he already imagined. It was imperfect and complicated and nothing like either family had imagined. It was perfect. When the officiant asked if they took each other, Their answers came without hesitation. I do. And when they kissed as husband and wife, the small church erupted in applause and tears. At the reception, Minho pulled Isabella onto the dance floor. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Choosing someone who made your life so difficult?" Isabella looked at the man who'd gone from tormentor to protector to partner, and she smiled. "Every day, and I'd choose it again every time. Even when I'm impossible? Especially then." They danced as the sun set over Seoul, two people who'd found each other in the worst way and built something beautiful from the rubble. Later, when Isabella's hand rested on the small swell of her stomach, a secret they'd only just discovered, a gift they hadn't expected so soon, she looked at Minho and saw their entire future written in his eyes. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," he said, "and I promise to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of it." "You already have." But Minho kissed her anyway, and in that kiss was every apology he'd never spoken, every promise he'd finally learned to keep, and every moment of the impossible, beautiful life they would build together. A life that started with cruelty and ended with grace. A life that proved love could heal even the deepest wounds. A life that was theirs, completely and perfectly theirs.